The clearing wasn't far from the edge of the forest, just beyond a small slope where the ground dipped and spread wide like a shallow basin. It was a familiar place, one I'd visited countless times during mushroom season. The late afternoon sun was gentle, filtered through the leaves of oaks and maples, casting a dappled light across the clearing. Everything seemed quiet. Almost too quiet. I'd been here for about 30 minutes, basket in hand, carefully picking mushrooms from the damp earth. Each one was perfectly shaped, their brown caps peeking through the moss like small, delicate domes. The air felt cool, slightly sweet with the scent of pine needles and fresh earth. I remember thinking how peaceful it was out here. Nothing but the soft rustling of leaves, the distant hum of insects. But as I knelt down to inspect another cluster, something shifted. It was subtle at first, an odd sensation of the air growing thicker like the weight of the sky was pressing down. I stood up, slowly looking around, suddenly aware that the usual forest sounds had faded. No more birds chirping. No wind moving through the trees. Even the insects had stopped buzzing. I blinked, trying to shake the sudden discomfort gnawing at me. The sun, which had been warming my back, seemed dimmer now, though no clouds had rolled in. It was just darker. Not nightfall, but a strange, muted gloom that blanketed the clearing, as if the light was being swallowed by something unseen. I looked up at the sky, and there it was, just a faint haze creeping in from the tree line, soft tendrils of fog swirling in the distance. The weight of the air continued to press down, and it felt harder to breathe, each inhalation like pulling in water instead of air. My chest tightened, a thick sensation creeping into my lungs, and a bead of sweat trickled down the back of my neck. I could still see the basket in my hand, the mushrooms I had picked, but everything else was fading into an eerie, unnatural twilight. Then, without warning, the world shifted. The familiar clearing, the comforting hum of the forest, disappeared into an abrupt silence. The kind that presses against your eardrums until they ache. My heart began to pound, echoing in the emptiness around me. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I took a step back, then another, feeling an overwhelming urge to leave. But as I turned toward the path that led out of the clearing, the fog thickened, swirling like smoke. Within seconds, it was as if the trees themselves had disappeared, leaving me in a shapeless void of gray mist. I spun in place, but every direction looked the same, just thick, impenetrable fog swallowing everything around me. I called out, my voice cracking in the silence, but it barely echoed before being smothered by the oppressive stillness. The heaviness in the air grew worse. My lungs ached with each shallow breath, and my skin prickled as if the very atmosphere was turning against me. Something was out there, watching. I could feel it in the tightening grip of the fog, in the strange way the darkness seemed to pulse at the edges of my vision. But no matter where I looked, there was nothing. Only the suffocating quiet. That's when I noticed, everything was turning darker still, faster now. The fog was not just thickening but closing in, wrapping around me like cold, wet hands. The silence grew heavier, as though the fog itself was breathing, its tendrils curling tighter around me. I was rooted in place, staring at the wall of mist that had swallowed the path I had come from. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I knew this clearing, I'd been here countless times. The forest never felt this strange, this hostile. But then I saw something. At first it was just a shadow, vague and distant. A human shape, barely visible through the thickening fog, standing on the path that led back into the forest. My pulse quickened. It looked like a person, someone impossibly tall, their outline distorted by the shifting mist. I squinted, trying to get a better look, but the figure didn't move. Just stood there, unnaturally still. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling barely above a whisper. No answer. The figure remained silent, its presence looming, almost blending into the fog. I felt a chill snake up my spine, my heart pounding harder now, echoing in the quiet. I took a step forward, hesitant, hoping, praying, that maybe it was another hiker or someone who had wandered into the woods. But as I moved, so did the figure. Not walking. It simply shifted like the fog carried it forward, closer. I froze, breath catching in my throat. My mind screamed at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the spot as I watched. The figure blurred, dissolving into the fog before solidifying again. Closer. Its height became more apparent now, easily over 7 feet tall, its arms too long, hanging unnaturally by its sides. Every instinct I had told me to turn and flee, but my feet remained glued to the ground, as if the mist itself held me in place. The figure vanished again, swallowed by the swirling mist. For a moment, the path was empty, just the gray void stretching ahead. My heart raced as I strained to see where it had gone. Suddenly, there was a sound behind me, barely a whisper, the faintest of footsteps in the damp earth. I spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing. Just fog. Endless choking fog. I gasped for breath, each inhale feeling like I was drawing in smoke. My head whipped from side to side, my vision swimming in the thick mist. And then I saw it again, closer now from the corner of my eye. The figure stood just off to the side, barely visible through the swirling fog. It hadn't made a sound. One moment it wasn't there, the next it was closer still. My skin crawled with fear, the hair on my arms standing on end as I took a step back. The figure didn't move, but its presence filled the clearing, oppressive, watching me with eyes I couldn't see but felt burning into me. I turned, breaking into a run toward where the forest path should have been, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But the fog closed in tighter, and no matter how fast I moved, I couldn't shake the suffocating sense that the figure was following, just out of sight. Then it appeared again. This time directly in front of me. I skidded to a halt, nearly stumbling over a root as my eyes locked onto the figure. It was clearer now, too close for comfort. The shape was undeniably human but grotesquely stretched. Tall, thin, its limbs too long for its body. No details. No face. Just a silhouette, darker than the fog, as though it absorbed the light around it. It flickered, disappearing for a heartbeat before reappearing a few feet closer. My heart jumped into my throat. I stumbled backward, feet catching on uneven ground. The figure flickered again, moving without moving, the fog warping around it. I couldn't tear my eyes away. It loomed closer, each second that passed dragging it nearer and nearer, yet it never seemed to move like a normal thing. It just was, defying every rule of the world I thought I knew. And then it broke. The stillness shattered as the figure surged forward, no longer gliding, no longer passive. It rushed at me, impossibly fast, the fog swirling violently in its wake as if it was tearing through reality itself. A sound escaped my throat, half scream, half gasp, as I turned and ran, my legs finally obeying the primal fear that had been building in me. The air grew colder, the fog denser. I could hear it now, the sound of something moving, heavy, rapid footsteps pounding the earth behind me, gaining on me with terrifying speed. My breaths came in shallow, desperate gulps as I sprinted blindly through the fog. My limbs burned, every muscle screaming, but I couldn't stop. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and it was there, closer than before. Its elongated arms outstretched, reaching for me, its shadowed form seeming to shift and ripple with each movement. The mist twisted around it like tendrils, drawn to it as if the very fog was part of this thing, helping it close the distance. It was right behind me now, so close I could feel the icy grip of its presence on the back of my neck, the weight of its form pressing down on me as I ran. There was nowhere to go. The clearing had vanished, the path gone, swallowed by the endless gray fog. The sound of footsteps thundered in my ears, louder, heavier, until they seemed to merge with the frantic beating of my own heart. And then, silence.